One more time. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Okay, cool. Can everyone see the PowerPoint we have there? Yep, good, awesome, perfect. So yes, thank you again for joining us. We're going to go through some strategies tonight that hopefully should help you and help your kids get more sleep. That's at the end of the day. That's what we that's what we all want. And there's so many health benefits. We're going to come back to that. Hallie's going to go over that here in a little bit with us as well. But there's so much value to a good night's sleep from both a mental health perspective, but for kids as they're growing and developing, a lot of that growth and development really happens when they're asleep, when they're resting, when they're recovering. And so we're going to spend some time and share some strategies, like I said, that we both use as parents to help our kids sleep through the night. Um, they always say that knowledge is power, and there's you see that saying, the more you know, right? And that's kind of a half truth. You know, if we share what we have tonight, we share this information, you guys take it in, you think, oh my gosh, that's a great, it was a great webinar, I really appreciate it, but you don't take any action on it, then we've kind of failed you to some degree. So knowledge is power, but applied knowledge, applied information is really where most of it comes from. So if we hopefully take these strategies and hopefully you can implement them as soon as you can to help all your kids get some better sleep, and like I said, the families get better sleep, because I know firsthand that, like I said, it affects the entire family. Like I said, we get it. We're parents too. You see my boys there. Hudson is my oldest. Owen is my youngest. Quick story: Owen, when he was born, so Hudson was 3, and I actually purchased the business where I'm at right now. I purchased Practice Health and Wellness 11 days before Owen was born, 5 weeks premature. And Owen was 6 pounds when he was born. He was a big, healthy boy. And we got to bring him home 48 hours after he was born. He was healthy, but he was so young, he wasn't neurologically developed enough that we had to wake him up every single 2 hours to feed him, because he wouldn't wake himself up. And so it was a lot of stressful nights, a lot of stressful days. And that first night that they actually sleep through the night, it's like, is everybody okay? What's going on here? And it just changes everybody's approach to the day. What do we hope you get out of tonight? One, why is sleep important for your child? And what's a normal sleep schedule? I think that's a pretty common question we get. Well, my child's sleeping this much. Like, how much should a child this age be sleeping? Pretty important question before we get out of if they have a problem or not, right? What are your options? Most people that I talk to, they say melatonin, and then my pediatrician says I'm just gonna grow out of it, right? But now my child's 2, now my child's 4, now my child's 6, and they haven't grown out of their sleep issues. When's this going to change? We're going to talk about what your options are, and maybe some options that you didn't even know were options. Hallie's going to go over 7 tips for master sleepers. Really some great information there. You're going to want to have your note-taking pencil and paper out for that one. There's some good strategies there. Is there an underlying cause of sleep problems? And if so, how do we find out? We're going to talk about some really cool technology. We can see how your child's stress response system is working, which is really important for sleep. And we're going to talk about success stories. Hallie and I both work with a lot of children now, and we see this day in and day out. We see parents who are on the other side, who had kids with the sleep struggles, and now they're on the other side of it, and life is totally different. And that's what, hopefully, at the end of the day, that's what we get for everybody who's on here as well. So the general kind of major issues we see, and like I said, a lot of times I hear, and Hallie, correct me if I'm wrong, similar stories over and over. The biggest one is not sleeping through the night interrupted. Kids waking up 1, 2. I had a patient who just started in my office that the little girl was waking up 4 to 5 times every single night, and never slept through the night since she was born. So that's usually a big one. I've had other children who, or it's difficult, if not impossible, to fall asleep. I had a parent who literally it took 2 hours every night to get their child to actually get to sleep. They had to almost like bear hug them and hold them down to get them to calm down enough and relax enough that they can actually fall asleep. And wetting the bed, that's something that even though they're potty trained, they're still not sleeping through the night. They're always waking up wet. There's always waking up other, excuse me, they're always waking up still wet and never made it through the night dry, or still wearing. I have a patient who is, let's see, he's 9 years old, and he was still having to wear diapers when he went to bed, not being able to go to sleepovers and things like that. And once again, it's another thing the pediatrician said, oh, you're just going to grow out of it, but he really hasn't. So what else is going on? Those are the things that I see. Are there others? If you join us late, there should be a chat box if everyone sees there. If you have any others that aren't on here that you want us to talk about tonight, or you want to bring up, or there's something, excuse me, that while I'm talking, a question comes up, feel free to put it in the chat box. We should be able to see the chat box. And if we don't answer your questions while we're going through the information tonight, we're going to take some time at the end and go through that as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Halle here. I'm going to let you go through what actually happens to our kids when they sleep. I'm going to let you talk about how much rest a child should be getting per night.
Sure. So two main areas I want to talk about. The first is, most of us as adults know we need sleep. When you're sick, the first thing we always hear is make sure you get plenty of rest. But sometimes we're not thinking about how truly vital sleep is. And when we're particularly talking about our children when they're still growing and developing, I like to talk a little bit about what is happening in their bodies when they're sleeping and whether they're getting continuous unfragmented sleep. So when they're sleeping, that's a time that their body is producing growth hormones, building their immune system, increasing blood supply to muscles, restores their energy, builds and repairs tissue. It can actually reduce crying spells during the day, and it obviously allows for growth mentally and physically. I often actually see children, I don't know, Dr. Reinhart, if you see this too, who will be behind a little bit developmentally, especially in physical milestones, which are really easy to track when they're very young. But once they start sleeping through the night, they start playing catch up very quickly because now their body is getting the sleep that it needs to start going through those processes to actually hit those developmental milestones. You see that too, good. And so then on the next slide, we talk more about, so what is the amount of sleep? I'm saying, yes, we need to make sure they're getting enough sleep. So what is enough sleep? Many people are a little bit surprised to see some of these numbers. So for 0 to 2 months, they should be getting 15 to 18 hours of sleep in a 24-hour period. All the way up until a year, they should be getting more sleep in a 24-hour period than they're not, is a really good rule of thumb. So even up until 11 months into 12 months, we're still looking at 12 to 15 hours of total sleep. And then there's some numbers there for toddlers as well. I think people, once you hit like 1.5, 2, bedtime start creeping later, toddlers start climbing out of cribs or out of beds. And so wake time starts getting closer to like 5 or 6. And then suddenly they're only getting 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep. And then they drop the nap and that doesn't change. And you can see all the way up until they're 5, you're still looking for 10 to 13 hours of total sleep. So if we're letting bedtime creep too late or wake time creep too early, we're cutting into that significantly, which can lead to all sorts of other behavioral issues, but also it's slowing down that development. So when we talk about overnight sleep and we say sleeping through the night, what does that mean? What's normal? Newborns 0 to 3 months, we say can wake 3 to 5 times a night to feed, to make sure that they're getting the calories that they need. That's the reason that they should be awake. They shouldn't be awake just to have a nighttime party. And a lot of times I have parents come to me and say, they're not interested in eating, they're just wide awake. So that's one of the things that we try to tackle when they're waking those times of night. When we say that they should be waking, it should be to feed and get overnight calories. Newborn daytime sleep is super inconsistent. It can range anywhere from 20 minutes to 3 hours. Naps start to lengthen between 4 and 6 months old, and it becomes a little bit more consistent. It's a little bit easier to see a routine and a pattern. And then another good rule of thumb for any of our toddler parents is that naps usually drop around 3. And so that's why when I was saying earlier, we have to be really careful about bedtime creeping too late or morning creeping too early, especially when they drop the nap. We have to ensure that they're getting enough overnight sleep to make up for the nap that's lost.
So there are really not a lot of options for parents when they look at kids with sleeping issues. Most of the time, if you're going to your pediatrician and asking for options, melatonin is the go-to. Give them melatonin before they go to bed. And when we look at the evidence, we look at the research and see, is it really that effective? It's unclear at best. Um, Sleep training is something that is pretty popular. Like I said, if you haven't met with Halle, if you have a child who has sleeping issues, and talking to a sleep consultant, so you're making sure you're doing it correctly, is something that we definitely recommend, obviously. And then others, most people. I'm a chiropractor by trade, so a lot of times there's confusion. Like, whoa, why is a chiropractor talking about sleep? And we have parents. I had a parent who, once again, a little girl was waking up 4 or 5 times a night, and she's like, I was desperate. I was willing to try anything. I have no idea why a chiropractor would help my child sleep, but I'm glad she came because now she's sleeping through the night and so she's a different child. And the answer is really, when we talk about chiropractic, we're not necessarily talking about neck pain, back pain. We're talking about optimization of the nervous system. So the nervous system is your brain, spinal cord, and nerves that branch off of your spinal cord. Your nervous system controls and coordinates every single function in your body. And what happens is when your spine shifts out of its normal position, it can create some degree of stress on those nerves. Now, when we talk about pinched nerves, once again, most people think, ouch, that must hurt. But the reality of the situation is you only feel about 10% of your nerves at any one point in time. 90% of your nervous system is communication, how your brain is talking to your body, specifically your organs and your muscles. And that's the goal of chiropractic, is to move your spine back into a position that relieves that stress and allows your brain to see what's happening inside your body. When you have those misalignments, your brain can't see what's happening inside your body. It puts your brain in a state of confusion and a state of panic, and all of a sudden the brain's in fight or flight mode, stress mode all the time. And so, another common thing that parents ask me is, well, okay, that makes sense, but like my child is a month old, 3 months old, 4 years old. Like they haven't been in a car accident. They haven't like they haven't slept wrong, right? Like why, how do they get pinched nerves in their spine? How do they get that? How does that happen? And the reality of the situation is almost all the time when we talk about a child and labor and delivery, specifically, how they were born really matters. Even a typical vaginal birth can be extremely, extremely stressful on a child, and especially the upper part of the neck where a lot of these brake pedal nerves are. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But when we see kids with a lot of sleep issues, we see kids with a lot of focus issues, attention issues, and things like that in school, oftentimes we find that there's some kind of intervention, whether that's C-section, forceps, or vacuum delivery. Not that we're against any of those procedures, but just by nature, how they have to basically get baby out of the womb puts an extra degree of stress, especially on the upper part of their neck, and is where this dysfunction, is where these misalignments really start, is where that nerve irritation starts as well. So oftentimes the story I hear is stressful pregnancy, stressful labor and delivery, baby was colicky, baby was crying a lot at night, not feeding very well, or maybe only if he or she attached, only maybe would attach to one side. And then, the sleep issues are with that as well. Then we see ear infections, and it leads to potentially other things as well. But where does it start? Oftentimes it starts before they ever take their first breath and how they were actually born. And so in our office, we have technology that helps us measure those nerves that they don't feel to see if there's something we can even help with. Before I'm going to start care, On a child, I want to know that they have something that I can potentially help with. And that's where the technology really, really comes in handy. The first scan that we do in our office is something called thermography, where basically we're measuring the temperature from one side of the spine to the other. And based on how big of a temperature difference there is from one side to another, we can get a good idea of how much stress there is, at the nerve at that level. So you kind of see the picture here. These little white bars mean little to no stress on the nerve. Green bars mean like a mild nerve stress. Blue would be a moderate stress, and red is severe. These nerves, once again, don't feel pain. So when I look at this, I don't say, oh, this person must hurt really bad here in the neck and right here in the middle back. They must hurt a lot. I think, okay, these nerves here at the very top are your body's brake pedal nerves, help calm, help relax, help digest, help immune system function, things like that. That must be, if they're all gas pedal and no brake, it's probably why they can't slow down enough to actually fall asleep or disengage enough to get into that deep, restful, relaxing sleep. There's a difference in sleep too. We want to make sure that they're actually getting in that recovery state of sleep. This is a vital part for my initial examination, but if it is something we think we can help with, we use this for re-exams as we go through care to make sure those nerve stresses are going down as we realign the spine to relieve that nerve stress. The other thing that we do is we measure something called heart rate variability, and this is a really important test for us as well. Sometimes it's a harder test to run on infants and younger kids, but for a kid who is like, we're getting the 3-4-year-olds especially and up, it's a really, really valuable test because it helps me see how your brain and how your nervous system manages stress. So when we talk about stress and our stress response, our nervous system is broken down into two branches. Half of our nervous system is called our sympathetic nerves, and that's our fight or flight response. They're the nerves that when we have stress, whether it's physical stress, emotional stress, or chemical stress, it doesn't matter. Their job is to get us ready to either fight that stress or run away from the stress. The example I always give, let's imagine all of a sudden there's a bear in the room with us right now. What happens to our body? Our heart starts racing, we start pumping adrenaline, all of a sudden we are making sugars and getting blood to our arms and our legs, and we're either going to fight that bear, or I don't know about you, but I'm going to try to run away, right? While I'm running away from the bear, am I worried about taking a nap or going to sleep? No. Am I worried about digesting my lunch? No. Am I worried about fighting off the flu bug? No. Am I worried about growth and development? No. I'm in 100% protection mode when I'm running away from the bear. So the other side of our nervous system are our parasympathetic nerves. They're our body's natural brake pedal. They are in control of, once that stress is gone, their job is to disengage, to tap the brakes and bring us back down to a normal resting level. They're also in control of sleep, immune system function, digestive system function, and any kind of growth and development is all on that brake pedal side. We can't be in protection mode and growth and development mode at the same time. We can only be in one or the other. Now, when we look at the brake pedal nerves, most of them are right up here at the very top of the neck. There's a big nerve called your vagus nerve that if there's some kind of stress, there's some kind of trauma, there's some kind of fixation up here, that brake pedal nerve can't do its job like it's supposed to. And a lot of times these kids are all gas pedal and no brake. If you look at the scans here, excuse me, the scan on the left-hand side, you see that little white dot. That shifted all the way over into the fight or flight. This little person is stuck in stress mode all the time and just can't neurologically disengage. The scan on the other side, where you kind of see the white dot is up high and right on that black line, that's a balanced scan. That's what we want to see. And if your child is stuck in fight or flight, it's always going to be hard for them to sleep because they can never neurologically disengage. They can never tap the brake pedal. So the other thing that I get asked a lot is, what does a pediatric adjustment look like? I've had a couple people in the past week who have started care, and they've seen the YouTube videos. If you've seen the YouTube videos of chiropractic, don't. They're terrible. They look terrible, and they're not reality of what we do in the office, especially when it comes to kids. So this is a little guy. He was having some sleep issues. His name is Noah, and he's going to demonstrate what a pediatric adjustment looks like. It loads for me. Working earlier. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Reinhart from Rocket Health and Wellness. Noah. Thank you. And one of the questions, one of the biggest concerns I get from parents when we talk about pediatric chiropractic is, what are you going to do to my child, right? We've all seen those videos on YouTube. We've all seen some of those crazy things that scroll through Facebook. And to be completely honest with you, I wouldn't want to get adjusted that way, let alone let my child be adjusted by someone who's doing that to my baby. And so what we want to do today is we're actually going to show an adjustment for Noah here, show some of the tools we use to make the adjustments, and kind of show you how gentle a pediatric chiropractic actually should be. Okay, so one of the things that we use, this is called an arthro stem. And it has a little tiny tap right here. And what we do is we find the misalignments anywhere in Noah's spine that there is a joint out of its normal position, putting some degree of stress on the nerves. We use this and we just do a slight tap that honestly tickles more than anything to make the correction. So we're going to go ahead and do that here for Noah. You doing it? You ready? Are you ready? So we just kind of start feeling the spine, feeling how things are working. I'm going to show you some of the other tools we use here first. A lot of times I go by the scans we talk about in the office. If you've seen previews of those before, help me really kind of localize where those areas of nerve stress are. But we're just looking for areas where the spine's not positioned correctly, putting some stress on the nerve. And that's all it is. We barely even tell anything's happening. It's so gentle. Good job, bud. Good job. Good job. See yourself on TV? Awesome. Okay, cool. One of the other tools we use a lot of temperature. If you've seen the thermal scans before, they help us really, based on temperature differential, how different it is from one side to another, we can get an idea of where the nerve stress is, how severe the nerve stress is. But the cool thing is, especially in the upper part of the back, where most of these really important nerves, like the brake-cone nerve, we talk about sleep, we talk about ear infections, we talk about ADHD, stuff like that. A lot of those sensitive nerves are up in the very top of the neck, and we can see pretty quickly, you can see a change. So when we find some misalignment up there, you want to go here, look over here.
No.
Go over here. Find the one that's on the, oh, who's that? Who's that? Perfect. Just recheck here. And sometimes it's all that simple. So you did a good job. Good job. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good job. But that's how a gentle pediatric chiropractic can be. Shouldn't hurt the child at all. No bending, no twisting, no popping. Use the instruments and oh, yay, say hi. And really makes a big difference for these kids. All right, cool. So I'm going to pass it back over to Halle, and Halle is going to go over 7 tips for master sleepers.
Okay. So first, I like to talk about sleep props. Sleep props are anything that helps a child fall asleep, anything external that helps a child fall asleep. Common sleep props would be things like nursing or bottling to sleep. Rocking is a big one. Even using pacifiers or anything that needs to be either replaced or done by someone else to help a child fall asleep. So our goal is for children to fall asleep independently without external props, just like you and I do. Another big one, we kind of touched on this earlier, is early bedtime. But early bedtimes are good for everyone, including the parents. But an ideal bedtime is anywhere between 6 and 8 p.m. Children naturally wake early. And then when I say early, I don't necessarily mean it's okay for them to be waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. and starting their day. But even if we're planning for a 6 or a 7 o'clock start, we still want bedtime to be somewhere between 6 and 8 p.m. The only real exception to this, assuming that your family has a pretty standard schedule, are very, very young babies that are newborns often are still napping at this time in the evening. And so they will have a later bedtime, closer to like 9 or 10 o'clock, but that's only because they're taking a nap during this time. So when you're trying to cram in those 18 hours that we were talking about of total sleep, then it goes well into the evening. And the third is, and this is a big one. I know we had some questions come in through Instagram, and I made some notes about this, but bedtime routine is huge. It's huge for babies, it's huge for adults, and everywhere in between. So bedtime routines help cue a child's brain and their body that bedtime is coming. And it's really important when we talk about their melatonin that's naturally in their body. We want to start cueing their body for sleep so that it knows that bedtime sleep is coming, not nap time sleep. We're not looking for an hour and a half. We're looking for 12 hours or whatever's appropriate for that age. Routines in general should be 20 to 30 minutes long. We don't want it to be any shorter than that, or it feels too rushed. And if it's longer than that, they can get a second wind, and we don't want that to happen either. We recommend that part of the routine takes place in the child's bedroom, but not necessarily in their bed. That's a common problem we have with toddlers. And a simple routine includes bottling or nursing, if they're still doing that, if we're talking about toddlers, not necessarily, but for babies. A bath is a great way for them to get that cue that bedtime's coming. They don't usually spend a lot of time in the bathroom otherwise, so that bath time is important. Jammies, lotion, stories, prayers, songs, anything like that, just a special moment together that's not rocking, and bedtime. In addition to a bedtime routine, we always talk about nap time routine. This is a much shorter version of what happens at bedtime, but it's still important that anytime sleep is coming, that we give them the opportunity to cue for that. So a short example of a nap time routine would be about 5 minutes long, and it's simply a diaper change. Maybe it's one story instead of two, and then placing the baby in bed awake. We do recommend trying to make that space dark. It's hard when they can't read a clock. Natural light is what helps cue them. So when you're putting them down in July at noon, it's helpful if the sun isn't blazing in their room. This time of year in Ohio, it's kind of feels dark all the time, but it's still really helpful to give them a dark space. Number 5 is just simply that sleep begets sleep. So it's really common for grandparents. My parents were some of these too, that say like, oh, little one had such a busy day, they're going to sleep like a rock. And, they skip their naps. And then what happens is they become overtired. And so they may fall asleep easily, but then they wake up early because they didn't fall asleep in a way that was good. We didn't set them up for ideal sleep. So really ensuring that they're getting good naps throughout the day avoids overtiredness, which equals quality sleep at night. Number 6, talking about night feeds. It's very common, and I did this, but it's very common when we are feeding young babies overnight that we let them kind of drift off peacefully while they're nursing or while they're bottling, especially if we're tired parents. It's a lot easier. But we want babies to stay awake during night feeds. So that might mean turning on a little night light, not necessarily overhead lights. We don't want it to be signal morning, but a light coming on, a night light, and then making sure baby stays awake, doing whatever you can. Might mean pulling baby off the breast or the bottle to prevent them from falling asleep, and then giving them the opportunity to get back on. I always tell parents, if baby's truly hungry and they're not just using that as a sleep prop, they will stay awake to eat, just like you would if you were hungry. Sometimes I think we overthink that as parents, but really, if they're hungry, they're going to eat. And number 7 is just consistency. One of the goals that a lot of my clients have is that, mom is the only one that can put baby down. And she's tired and she wants a break from that, whether she wants dad to step in or she wants when grandparents come, they can do it, or a babysitter. But what we want is to show baby that no matter who is putting him or her down for sleep, as long as that routine is there and we're consistent with how we go to bed and what happens if we wake up in the middle of the night, then anyone can do it. So consistency is huge. And we also don't want to confuse the child when we're trying to teach them something by changing what we're doing, or, you know, mom does one thing, dad does another thing. That no one can learn that way. So consistency is a big part of that.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna go over, let's see here. Any tips for nap time training? Our son, Jen's got a question here. Our son is terrible at taking naps unless we are holding him or riding in a car. He cries when we put him in his crib at any time. How long is appropriate to cry for a nap versus bedtime?
It's actually a really good question. I've had a lot of clients who've figured out the overnight and they're just trying to figure out nap time. My first question would be, how old is your child? The big thing for naps is making sure that wake time is appropriate, and also making sure that 6 months. Okay. So when we first started talking, we were talking about the fact that this is usually around the time when you can start to expect a little bit more consistency out of a child. When they're 2 months old, it's really hard to expect much because they're still trying to figure life out. So at 6 months, we really want to make sure that their wake times are appropriate. Usually we're down to 2 naps and maybe a cat nap at this age. But that's still that total sleep for a 6-month-old for the daytime is 3 to 3.25 hours of daytime sleep. So we could talk about this on the side, Jen, as well, but the big thing is making sure that wake times are appropriate, no less than 2.5 hours for a 6-month-old. And that's ensuring that they're tired when it's time to take a nap. And you said that, or riding in a car. So I'm just curious, are you like in a car a lot? Like a lot of times what happens is baby goes to daycare. And so one of the naps is always on the way home after daycare, for example. And when you're rocking, or holding, my question would be, how many times have you tried doing something different? And is baby nursing or bottling close to this bedtime? Because a lot of times what happens is they start to get drowsy doing something else, and then you go to lay them down and it's kind of that like a transfer of like, oh, I hope they keep sleeping as I lay them down. And then they wake up after 20 minutes because they realize that whatever put them to sleep stopped. And so that's what we're talking about making sure that nothing helped them go to sleep, because then it has to help them stay asleep, which is not ideal for anyone. Those are a couple of tips, but I would say it would be helpful to learn a little bit more about your family's routine. So we'll put that information up at the end. If you want to follow up with me afterwards and see if I can provide some more suggestions for you.
Awesome, awesome. Great, thank you. Okay, cool. Well, we're gonna talk about a couple of success stories here, and then we're gonna take some time to answer some more questions. I know there's some that came in on Facebook earlier, and then we will, we'll finish up here. So those who want to get to sleep can get to sleep. But this is a little guy that came into our office. This is Reese. Reese, when he first came into the office, mom said he was having a tough time falling asleep, and if he did fall asleep every night, he would wake up 4 to 6 times every single night. And this has been going on for years. When Reese came in, these are what his thermal scans look like. The first scan you see on the left-hand side was that thermal scan that helps me analyze the nerves that talk to the organs. We want to see these little areas that are white. White means little to no stress. Green is mild. Blue, moderate. Red, severe. Black is worse than severe. So he was, especially at the very top and very bottom. That's important because when we look at those brake pedal nerves, they're all at the very top and very bottom. The middle part of his back are all the gas pedal nerves. So basically anywhere where he could have had stress on the brake pedal, he did. And then post, we started care, started realigning his spine, taking stress off of those nerves, and lo and behold, mom said he started falling asleep easier. It wasn't a fight. He started sleeping through the night. Everybody started sleeping through the night. And when we got to the point where we did his rescan and checked him again, here's what a scan looked like. This is more what a normal scan, what we want to see. No areas where there's color, a bunch of areas that are white, and everything just working like they're supposed to.
Okay, you can hear me. I thought I was muted.
Sorry.
This is Cash. Cash was 21 months when we started working together, and I chose this one because this is a really hard age. When children start coming up on their 2-year birthday, we're dealing with a baby that is stuck in limbo of how much they want to understand and how much they actually understand. So this is a really common age where kids figure out how to get out of their crib, but we don't want them to move to a bed. But they don't have the development yet to understand staying in their crib, and definitely don't have the development of staying in a bed. So Cash was a really special case, just because of his age. And he was also a great example of the fact that a routine does wonderful things. And this was a mom who was an older mom, and she, on her call with me, said that this isn't what I thought motherhood was supposed to be. And that was a really sad feeling for me, that she felt that way. And so we worked really hard to get Cash staying in his crib. So she was worried about his safety, crawling out of a crib and falling. And I actually just spoke with this mom a couple of weeks ago because they had a little mini regression, because Cash got sick and there was a little bit of extra TLC given, maybe beyond the point I would have suggested. But now, just after a quick phone call, because he now has such a good foundation, he's right back to going to bed in the way that we wanted him to be, and sleeping through it, not coming to mom and dad's bed in the morning.
Awesome, awesome. Here's Jackson. Jackson, once again, same kind of story. Was waking up 5 to 6 times every single night. Once we started, I love when I hear this from parents. Like, I don't know if it's a coincidence, but they they actually slept through the night last night. I'm like, no, it's not a coincidence. But really, really cool little guy, and started sleeping through the night pretty quick once we started care. And this is Thea. She always cracks me up every time she comes in the office. Of course, Thea couldn't do. We had to do a silly picture with Thea, but same kind of thing. She was fighting sleep every night. Her mom was trying to, and maybe some feedback on this. Her mom was rewarding her with jelly beans. So if she stayed in her bed, she would get the jelly beans as a reward, and she would never get them. But once she started care, she got them every single night. She would go to bed, she would fall asleep, stay asleep, and then get her jelly beans in the morning. So she was pretty excited about that.
Rowan, that face. This is a face of a very happy child. She was waking up many times a night. She had a nursing mom who was exhausted, and she was actually my fastest student. She slept through the night after 2 nights of working together. I think she just really needed it and really wanted it. This is actually another mom I've spoken with recently, because she's helping me with my website and testimonials. And so many months later, she's still happy enough to write another testimonial. So Rowan she was just really great to work with, because I swear she was just as excited as she looks to be sleeping. So
Awesome.
she was a sweetie.
Awesome. And this is always the best when we get text messages like this. This is a text message I got from a mom. I'm very happy to report that Ethan asked to go upstairs to bed 45 minutes early last night, which is unheard of. No nightmares. He got up at 12:15 to go to the bathroom, which is normal. He went back to sleep until 6 o'clock. Thank you. See you next week for the follow-up. And you can see his scans. He had a lot of stress, once again, right at those brake pedal nerves. So he was just having a tough time calming down neurologically to actually get to sleep and falling asleep and staying asleep. So I want to thank you again for taking time out of your day, out of your night, to come join us tonight. Hopefully you got some little tips, little pointers that you guys can put into play right away, and help your kids and help everybody sleep a little bit better. I want to present with an opportunity, though. Most of the time when I'm going through this and Hallie's going through this, parents say, gosh, I wonder if that could help my child. I wonder if that could help my brother-in-law's child, my sister's child, right? I wonder if ... Well, we want to give you an opportunity to see, and we want to make sure that we hit you from both kind of angles. You know, someone's coming in for chiropractic care, but they don't have a very good environment at home to make sleep relaxing as what it can be. It's not going to be as beneficial. If Hallie's working with some kid and they're all fight or flight, they're all stressed out, and their body can't neurologically calm down and relax, it's not going to be as beneficial. We notice the best is when we both work together, we get the best results. So what we're offering right now, everybody in their inbox should have an email. And what we're offering is $47 for consultation with both of us. You get to have the neurologic scans that we can check and see if there's something we can help out with your child. You get a consultation with Halle to see if there's something there that she can maybe give you some recommendations with, and give you some more direct feedback, learn more about your family, learn more about your routine, and give you the best recommendations for your child. And what's best about that is what we're doing is we're actually taking all the money that we raise from this, and we're donating it to an organization called the National Wellness Family Alliance, and they're using all their money for more pediatric research. There's a lot of money that goes into research, but almost very, very little amount goes into pediatric research specifically. And we're hoping to make a dent in that and change that a little bit. So everything that you guys do from those consultations and exams all goes to research, and just gives us an opportunity to see if we can help your kids. That offer will be available until December 15th. So you should be able to respond on the email. And if you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or reach out to Halle specifically, and we'll do everything we can to help you guys out. If you have any questions about that, like I said, my email should be there. And we're recording this tonight too. So if you want to rewatch tonight, we're going to upload this to YouTube. So we'll send out a replay of it tomorrow as well. So you should get that in your inbox as well. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and there were a few questions on Facebook, and I'm going to go through it and answer. And a lot of my questions, my answers are very similar. So I'm going to give most of that to Halle and see if she has anything to add on. If you need to go to bed, I get it. Thank you again for joining us. I'm going to try to answer some of the questions on Facebook here. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat box. But I know we were talking with Jen a little bit. I'm assuming this is the same Jen, but Jen says, I think we kind of already went through. Jen, is there anything else that I saw your Facebook post? I was reading through it. I think we maybe we hit most of the points. Was there anything else you can think of that we didn't touch on that you would like to ask? Not this time. Okay, perfect, Jen. Great. Nicole, I saw your message. I'm gonna message you specifically. The short answer to that is yes. The long answer to that is depends on what caused the seizure as well. So we're gonna if you have questions about that more directly, that might be a better for a one-on-one. Even if you want to chat sometime over the phone, that would probably be a good question there. But the short answer is yes. Nicole, I also saw it says you have a 2.5-year-old boy who hasn't excuse me, been talking all day. Hasn't been a great sleeper. Lately he's waking in the middle of the night for 2 to 3 hours. We can put him back in his crib, but he climbs out repeatedly. We can deal with the usual trouble sleeping, but how do we get him to stay asleep? Halle, you got any other tips? I think we maybe touched on a little bit for kids who are in that, and like when you get to 2.5 and they're climbing out of their crib, that's kind of that zone you were talking about a little bit earlier. Any other recommendations there?
Yeah, Nicole, this is this age is one of the hardest, and it's hard if you said that he's never been a great sleeper, and so it's hard when they don't have any foundation going in, because you don't know where you could be, is the best way to say that. If you were my client and you said, he's 2.5 and he's climbing out of his crib, my preference is not to move a child to a bed until they're 3. That's because developmentally they're not ready yet. As I was saying earlier, they don't understand, and it's a lot harder But that being said, 2.5 is also the point where I would say, okay, well, let's see what we can try. And if safety ends up being the biggest concern, then we might have to move. But all of that being said, Cash, the little guy that we talked about earlier, part of his regression was that now he was getting back out of his bed and he was getting a little bit closer to this 2.5 mark. Our goal in working with a child this age is to ensure that they're getting, when it's bedtime, they're ready to sleep. I would be curious, and I have the chat box if you're able to answer up. I would be curious if you're having any issues getting him to sleep, or does he fall asleep between 5 and 20 minutes, no fighting, like happy to do so, and then he's just waking up after the 2 to 3 hour mark? If you're able to tell me that, that would be helpful. If not, that would be my first question, is just.
Nicole said she messaged me probably. She said, yes, it takes forever, especially lately.
Okay. So what I would want to do is to look at your overall schedule as a family, what's going on for him, because at this age, what's happening after bedtime is usually a result of what happens at bedtime. So we want bedtime to happen, a routine 20 to 30 minutes. He's asleep within 5 to 20 minutes, and that he is ready to go to sleep. So a couple things you could check if you have the will to try some things on your own, would be simply to make sure that he's not having too long of a nap during the day. At this age, 2 hours is pretty much the max he should be napping during the day. But that's also assuming that he's getting good sleep at night. So if he's waking up multiple times a night and that sleep is fractured, he might be more tired during the day than a child that's sleeping easily. But he very much has the ability to sleep 10 to 11 hours at night without waking up. So my suggestion to you would be to consider how much daytime sleep he's getting, consider what your bedtime routine looks like, and if it's appropriate based on what we talked about earlier in the presentation. And if you feel like you're doing those things right, or you just don't have the energy, then I would suggest taking advantage of that 15-minute call so I can learn a little bit more about him and your family.
Awesome. Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and last one I saw, Megan. Megan says she has a 4-year-old. They've always struggled with sleep. Currently, he wakes 1 to 2 times a night. Usually comes into our bed restless when he sleeps. He takes a while to fall asleep and wakes up early around 5 a.m., goes to bed around 8. He'll take an afternoon nap if prompted. He also went from falling asleep on his own to wanting one of us with him. Is there anything we can do or add to help? We have consistent bedtime routine and have tried white noise, calming music, night light, stuffed animals.
Did you want me to take that one?
Yeah, no, I mean, my answer to basically all of these is that it depends. Start with a scan to see if there's stress. I mean, especially if he's restless at night, if he's not getting that really deep, relaxing sleep, if he's always constantly moving around, that's a pretty good indication that he's not in that restful, relaxing sleep, and he's kind of more of that big, shallow sleeper. And I would
That's
imagine,
not quality sleep.
yeah, I would imagine that there's something. He's probably really fight or flight, probably a lot of go 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 type of a personality. So that would be something I would start with a scan to see if that's the case, and then from a chiropractic standpoint, usually could make a pretty big impact there. But yeah, go ahead and I'll let you answer that too.
No, I think the nail on the head here for me is, especially with older toddlers and young children, I think we really have to check physical in their body, in sleep environment, what's happening in their bodies, but also the environment that they're sleeping in, and how we're setting them up. So in this case, I would say Megan had mentioned that it takes a while to fall asleep. That sweet spot is 5 to 20 minutes. So if it's longer than that, then something's wrong in the schedule. And then she said he will take an afternoon nap if prompted. So one of the mistakes we make as a parent is prompting unnecessarily. A 4-year-old that's napping, maybe shouldn't be napping unless you're in this vicious cycle of not getting good nighttime sleep. So now they're cranky. And so we give them a nap, and then they're getting a decent nap, and then they're not ready for bed because really they shouldn't need a nap. And so we have to kind of break that cycle and look at total sleep in a 24-hour period. And if we're going to give them a nap, then what's the appropriate bedtime? Unfortunately, I see a lot of parents, like here it says 8 p.m. bedtime, but if he took a nap on that day and he didn't have at least 4 or 5 hours of wake time, he's probably not ready for bed. And then if they go through the bedtime routine and they get overtired, then they get that second wind that we get if we like suddenly need pizza at 1 a.m. That's what happens to our kids at just a much more decent hour. And so then he can't fall asleep. And then when you go to bed and you're overtired, that's when we start having those night wakings. And I think, did she say my only other concern, because she said he also went from falling asleep on his own to wanting one of us with him. And I don't think Megan's on right now unless somebody else is listening in for her. That cues me to wonder if there was something that happened recently, like another baby came into the house, something social, something that happened at school, or like he started a daycare or a preschool, or got really sick. But for him to change wanting a parent to be with him, somebody gave him that idea, whether it was always with good intention, but one night he had a really hard time, so we read books together in bed, or brought him into our bed to read books or something like that, that taught him like, oh, I like this better. And now he wants it. And that's something that a 2-year-old is not necessarily going to think of, but a child that age will. So my biggest concern would be at bedtime. Something's happening at bedtime that's messing up the rest of the night.
Awesome. Thank you for that insight.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, guys. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you again for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, once again, let us know. Reach out to the email, respond to that. You guys always can reach out to us on our Facebook page as well. Halle is also on Instagram. Halle, what's your Instagram?
Yes, I'll put it in the chat. It's the_sleep_bay.
Awesome. Yep. Perfect. And thank you again for joining us, and hope to see many of you soon. Have a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.